Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our Seaboard Region celebration of the 80th anniversary of Torah Fund. We are so pleased to see so many of you here on this Sunday afternoon to enjoy what I know will be a memorable and moving program. My name is Cheryl Wasserman, and I am honored to be the Seaboard Region Vice President for Torah Fund. We want to thank, firstly, Karen Belina at Women's League for Conservative Judaism for so capably handling the technical aspects of today's program. She also is responsible for preparing the lovely flyer that you've all seen. We are so honored to have in the audience several of our Women's League and Seaboard Region dignitaries. Marjorie Furman, our Seaboard Region President, Rita Wertlieb, who wears many hats as a Torah Fund chair within our region, but also internationally, co-chairs the 80th anniversary program, including the 80+80 fundraising. As of last night, I am proud to announce that Rita and her husband, Barry, became great-grandparents for the first time. A beautiful girl, Charlie Grace Weisenbach, was born to her granddaughter, Brenna. Mother and daughter are doing well, mazel tov. I have a lot of catching up to do, Rita. We are also fortunate to have among us Marcia Toppel, co-chair of the Legacy Program, who is also a Seaboard Region sister, and she will briefly share information on the Torah Fund Legacy Program following the rabbi's address. The Torah Fund Legacy Program following the rabbi's address. Maddie Gimbel and Janet Kirshner, can you wave to us, please? The International Torah Fund Vice Chairs, directly assisting Barbara Ezring wherever needed. And of course, Barbara Ezring, the International Torah Fund Chair. I don't know how she seems to be at the call all the time, everywhere at once. If the name Ezring sounds familiar when I introduce our Cantors, one of whom is her son, the other her daughter-in-law. She must be so proud. So I turn now to Barbara Ezring for some welcoming remarks. Barbara?
Thank you, Cheryl. I am so happy to be back in Seaboard Region. Thank you for organizing today's Torah Fund program and for inviting me. I'm honored to bring greetings from Women's League International President Debbie Kaner-Goldich and from Women's League's dedicated philanthropy, Torah Fund. After 2 years working biyachad together through a pandemic, we transitioned to in-person, hybrid, and virtual events. And we transitioned to a new Torah Fund theme, Chazak ve'amatz, be strong and courageous. Our theme is one that is found in our texts when transitions occur. We are continually transitioning. We, the members of Women's League, have shown our strength and courage in support of our conservative Masorti students since our founding in 1918, providing Shabbat meals and creating housing for rabbinical students. In 1942, a title was given to our efforts, Torah Fund. Torah Fund was founded during World War II. Imagine the strength and courage of the women who asked for donations of $6.11 from every member of Women's League. Next, they asked for $18. Then in 1957, members who donated $100 were recognized with a gold charm, starting a new Women's League minhag. Today, thousands of donors proudly wear a Torah Fund pin, signifying our dedication to supporting our future conservative Masorti leaders around the world. We have transitioned in the way we raise funds. We provide for the needs of our students through our general Chazak ve'amatz campaign fund and through the Creating New Spaces campaign. We provide for future needs by becoming members of the Torah Fund Legacy Society. So please contact Marcia Toppel for more information about this important way to contribute to Torah Fund. Another transition is the number of institutions of higher Jewish education that we support. For years, we supported one institution. Today, we support 5 institutions in the US, Israel, Argentina, and Germany. Today, we have the opportunity to learn from 3 graduates of the Jewish Theological Seminary. I had the unique opportunity to watch one of our guests transition from making a joyful noise as a young child to encouraging others to join him in joyful prayer. All 3 of our guests influence others to engage in meaningful Jewish life. They're representative of the alumni who we supported as students through our Torah Fund donations. Thank you so much for your support and your gifts to Torah Fund. Thank you again for inviting me to be with you today. May we all have strength and courage as we negotiate the transitions of our time.
Thank you so much, Barbara. That was very informative and moving. I now turn to Marjorie Furman, our Seaboard president, who was so instrumental in putting this program together. Marjorie?
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Barbara, for your words of greetings. They were meaningful. How wonderful it is to see so many of our sisters here today. It was an overwhelming response to our program, and thank you all for coming. As president of Seaboard Region, I bring greetings from the members of our region to each other and others, its officers and chairs, to all our friends here. Both Women's League and Torah Fund selected the theme Chazek V'Ametz, Be Strong and Courageous, for the 2022-23 year. Here, Seaboard Region has embraced the theme in our programming. It drives all of us to persevere toward our individual goals and the goals of our sisterhood, region, and Women's League. Torah Fund. Our education program, Remembering the Holocaust through the lens of music, art, and poetry, we will hear from experts in the field and who are wonderful teachers. This will truly be a fascinating look at how the Holocaust inspired works of art by survivors and victims. The flyer and registration form were in our latest newsletter and will be repeated again. One last quick note. Speaking of strength and courage, did you know that the nominated next international president is from Seaboard Region? Julia Loeb will be installed at the next Women's League convention after our vote confirming her nomination to the presidency. We hope to have a large and vocal delegation to celebrate Julia's achievement. Our Madricha, Stacy Zuckerman and Geraldine Payne, are working hard to make sure that we have a great time in Schaumburg, Illinois. The date, so mark your calendars for July 16th through 19th for a trip to the Women's League International Convention. Read our newsletters for more details as they are available. If you are not receiving our newsletter, please let me know, and I will make sure that you get on our mailing list. A lot of interesting and important information is shared every other week. We do bi-weekly. We include highlights from Women's League Week, activities of other sisterhoods, other regions, most of which you can attend for free as a member of Women's League. Again, thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoy our program. Cheryl?
Thank you, Marjorie. A few housekeeping tips before we begin, and I know we want to hear our speaker and our musical group. Donations are encouraged. This event is free to Women's League. which means sisterhood members. But if you haven't made a donation to Torah Fund this fiscal year, we would appreciate a donation of at least $18. Recording. As you know, this program is being recorded and will be made available for those who could not join us or want a replay. Identifying yourself. Please be sure your full name is associated with your video. If you're having difficulty with that, please use the chat and we will send instructions. So display your questions. Please post questions or comments in the chat. Marjorie Furman, as another role, will be monitoring the chat so we can address questions at the end of the formal presentation and combine similar questions. Rabbi Cella has graciously agreed to answer follow-up questions that are not addressed today through email. Muted. You are all muted, or at least I heard someone clearing their throat, so maybe that's an exception, but you are all muted. And so now it is my pleasure to introduce Rabbi Margie Cella, who will tell us the story of how she and her husband Raymond came to Judaism together almost 40 years ago. Not only is she Jewish by choice, she went even further on her journey to the Rabbinate. She was ordained at the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York City in 2019 after a successful 30-year career as a high school math teacher. Though she enjoyed teaching, she thought about becoming a rabbi for a long time. In 2014, still living on Long Island, New York, she retired from teaching and traveled roughly 5 hours round trip daily for 5 years from her home in Port Jefferson to commute to JTS. Now that's dedication. During her final year at JTS, Rabbi Cella served as the part-time interim rabbi of Congregation Agudas Israel, a conservative synagogue in Newburgh, New York. Since April of 2021, Rabbi Cella has been serving as an educator at Women's League. Teaching is both her love and her strength, and she loves sharing Torah and inspiring others to deepen their knowledge of Judaism and commitment to observing the mitzvot, inspiring others as well as her 2 children, their spouses, and 6 grandchildren, another I have to catch up with. Rabbi Cella is currently writing 2 books, one based on a year-long study of the Torah written during the pandemic, and one based on, I said year-long study, I mean every year, every day of the year study of the Torah, as well as one based on her life story. Her story is both cautionary and inspirational, and one that you will not soon forget. Rabbi Cella?
Thank you, Cheryl, and I apologize that was me. I forgot I had unmuted myself already and I cleared my throat, so I apologize for that. But thank you for that wonderful introduction, and I want to thank you all for inviting me to come and speak for you today and tell you my life story. And so it's kind of difficult to compress 50 years down into about a half an hour's time. But I will address the highlights. So I heard that a number of people from Seaboard Region are familiar with Long Island in New York, and some of you even have some roots here. I have been a Long Island girl all my life. I was born in Queens, but moved to Massapequa in New York when I was 3 weeks old. My parents moved there. Massapequa is our most famous native is Jerry Seinfeld. I never met him, but that's the town I grew up in. And then after marriage, except for one 10-month stint when my husband and I lived in Oxon Hill, Maryland, right after we got married, except for that, we have lived in Suffolk County on Long Island ever since. So yeah, so I grew up in a Protestant home. Specifically, Lutheranism was the denomination in which I was raised. And my parents were very strict church-going family. A lot of what went on in our home revolved around my parents' relationship to the church, their social activities, their friends, and they would go to Bible studies and things like that. Very much like the dedication that most of us have to our synagogues. And so we went to church. Going to church every Sunday was a foregone conclusion. And going to Sunday school for me as I was growing up was also a foregone conclusion. And it was not until I was a teenager when I began formal education in the Lutheran faith and was really being taught the basics of Lutheranism, that the rebellious teenager in me started to come out, and I started to question a lot of the most fundamental beliefs of the church. Number one, I always struggled with the idea of Jesus being half man and half God. And I also always struggled with the idea of God being Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, but that's one God, not three. And again, I do not denigrate anyone who is a religious Christian, but for me personally, these were things that I struggled with. And when I asked questions, I didn't get satisfactory answers. Basically, I was told, you don't ask questions. So I continued on with my education. And as I went through high school, I would say a kind of awkward kid sometimes. Socially, as I neared the end of my senior year of high school, there just seemed to be, for me, a lot of things going wrong in my life. I was at odds with many of my girl friends. My boyfriend had broken up with me, and I was not happy about that. And just a lot of, and to us it sounds trivial, but I taught high school seniors for 30 years, and I know for kids in high school, these are traumatic things. Who's going to go to the prom with me? Am I going to go to college? What am I going to major in? Et cetera, et cetera. These are all major decisions that 16 and 17-year-olds have to make in their senior year of high school. By the time I got to that year, there were also some interesting things taking place at my church. A new pastor had come a few years before, who was now drawing a fairly large following, not only from our church, but beyond our church, and from literally every denomination that one could think of, in various denominations of Protestantism, Roman Catholicism, and yes, a number of Jews were attracted to him as well. And so he was running this separate entity within the walls of the church building, but it was separate from the church congregation itself. And it was beginning to attract a fairly large following, particularly among young people. And a number of my friends from high school were getting involved in this, particularly at this time when so much was going on in my life that I was struggling with. And of course, what this was at that point, I would describe as a born-again Christian kind of experience. And the message was, you have to accept Jesus in order to be saved. And if you accept Jesus, all your problems will be solved. Jesus loves you and we love you. And that was basically the message. And as I said, a number of my friends from school started to get involved. So putting that all together, having friends get involved, pressure from friends, at the same time dealing with social issues and having to make difficult decisions in my life, one thing led to another. And the very end of my senior year of high school, I became involved with this group. As I said, it was mainly at that point born-again Christian. Very much like a lot of the evangelical preachers that you'll see on TV. But over the course of the next several years, this group morphed into something very, very, very different. And I will tell you that I joined this group at the age of 17, and I spent the next 11 years of my life involved with this group. 11 years, and let me tell you what happened, major life events happened to me during those 11 years. During that time, I graduated high school. attended and graduated college, met and married my husband, started my career, and had both of my children. That's a lot of major life events to take place during that 10-year period. And it all happened in the shadow of this group, which, having begun as a born-again Christian group, morphed into what I would call Hebrew, we called ourselves Hebrew Christians, which was trying to mix some of the beliefs of Christianity with the beliefs of Judaism, a la Jews for Jesus or groups like that. And the rationale for that was, well, you know, if we believe in Jesus and we accept Jesus as our Messiah, and Jesus was a Jew and Jesus was an observant Jew, and if we believe in him, we should want to emulate Jesus. So as time went on, Jewish rituals started to be introduced, and the character of Jesus started to change. Initially, we talked about him as the Messiah, and then we started to talk about him as, well, he was the Messiah, but we didn't talk about him as being so godly anymore, but more a human being, but still the Messiah. And then it kind of morphed into, well, he was a great prophet. And then I think ultimately by the time we left there, he was not spoken about so much anymore at all. And honestly, I think if you had spoken to 10 different people that were there at that time, you probably would have gotten about 10 different answers as far as what people thought about Jesus, because there was a lot of confusion. By the way, let me just interrupt myself for a moment. As I'm speaking, the chances are you may have questions that occur. And if you try and hold on to them till the end, you may forget them. So please feel free to type them into the chat, which will be, and the Q&A will be monitored at the end by Marjorie. But if you type them into the chat, then she'll have those questions and can ask them at the end, which I will be happy to do. Okay, so this group, we put a special emphasis on those who were born Jewish. They had like a special aura about them because we all wanted to be Jewish. We all wanted to observe Jewish things, but we weren't born Jewish. So we really were in awe of those who were born Jewish. So the people who were born Jews, they were like a subgroup of this whole group. And the pastor, whose name was Jack Hickman, said that he adopted them all as his family. He himself was never married or had never had children. He said he adopted that they became his family. So those of us who were not in this inside group, of course, were envious and wanted to be part of this group. And eventually it was opened up so that one could apply to the group. You had to submit an application, you had to be interviewed, and all of this. So by that time, my husband and I were married already. We applied for membership in the group and we were accepted. Now, during the interview, some of the questions that were asked were about, did we understand that we had an obligation to tithe 10% of our gross income, not our net income? That was an obligation expected of everyone in the group. And that we also, everything in our lives took place in the context of this group. And also we accepted the authority of Jack Hickman, who by this point, since we were considered a family, was going by the title Abba. So I'm sure you're all realizing by now that what I'm talking about, this was a cult situation. We did not see it for that. And there were people who told us it was a cult and we did not believe that and we did not want to see that, but it was. And as more and more Jewish ritual was introduced, more and more Christian ritual went by the wayside. So what kinds of Jewish ritual were introduced? The first thing that was introduced was Friday night Shabbat dinner, lighting candles, making kiddush, making motzi, and we were all doing this in our homes. Followed by eventually the Havdalah service to end Shabbat was introduced. Eventually, the Saturday morning, Shabbat morning service was introduced. We didn't have services on Sunday morning anymore. We had services on Saturday morning. If you were to walk into the building where we had our services, it was set up pretty much like a Sephardic synagogue is set up. The Aron Kodesh was on the eastern wall, and then the Shulchan was in the middle of the room. We actually had a Sefer Torah that someone had purchased from somewhere. We davened, we did away with the Christian hymnals. We were davening from a Sephardic Siddur. And there were some people who were able to read from the Torah, and some people were able to read the Haftorah. And then, of course, the highlight of the service every week was Abba's sermon. And the room was separated. The left side of the room was where the women sat, and the right side of the room was where the men sat. So what else was introduced? Obviously, since we were having Shabbat morning services, the concept of wearing a talit was introduced for the men, as well as tefillin. Men were taught to wear tefillin so that when they davened on a weekday service, they could do that as well. Women learned how to keep a kosher home. Women also were educated in the laws of family purity, and 2 mikvahs were actually constructed in the homes of 2 families within the congregation. And towards the end, one of the last things that started to be introduced was the idea of modesty in dressing. But then there were other things which were not traditionally Jewish in nature. The hierarchy within this group. Abba was the leader, and underneath Abba, there were 12 men handpicked by Abba. It was a definitely very patriarchal group, 12 men, and these men were called elders. All the other members in the group, each of us was assigned to an elder. If we had any major life decisions, we could not make them without first consulting with our elder. And sometimes he would take the decision back to Abba. And if they said it was okay, then we could do it. If they said it wasn't okay, then we couldn't do it. And then beneath the elders, then the smallest unit was the family unit. And within the family unit, the husband, the father in the house was referred to as the priest of the family. And again, within the family structure, what he said was what he said went. And any single women in the congregation were assigned to a family, and particularly to a married man who would be their priest, so to speak, to make decisions for them. So this was the structure that we lived in with, for, like I said, for 11 years. Behind the scenes, there were other things going on, which of course we did not realize until much later on. Now, I do have to say that along the way, I myself was always curious. I've always been a voracious reader all my life, and I liked to study, and I would read books of Jewish themes. And at the same time, I was attending Stony Brook University, studying for my master's degree. And I ended up taking 4 courses at Stony Brook, which, by the way, I was supposed to ask permission for before I took them, because they were courses of a Jewish nature. And we were supposed to ask permission before we had contact with the outside Jewish world. It's probably easy for one to understand why, because when we had contact with the outside Jewish world, that's when we started to realize that maybe things were a little bit different between what we did and what they did. And all of the synagogues on Long Island knew about our existence and had their eyes on us. Our group, I would estimate, was probably about 2,000 people at its peak. drawing from, like I said, every denomination of Christianity, and we had quite a few Jews as well. So getting back to Stony Brook, the 4 courses that I took, the first one was a course in American Jewish fiction. The second one was a course in the history of Judaism in the United States. And as part of that course, I learned about the difference between Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox Judaism, which played a very important role later on. The third course I took was a course in the history of anti-Semitism as taught through literature. The first thing we did was begin to study the Christian Bible, the first 4 books, the Gospels, to show how a lot of anti-Semitism has its roots right there. That helped me finalize how I felt about some of the things regarding Jesus at that point. And then the last one was a class on studying the Holocaust through literature. When I took that class, I was a brand new mother for the second. My daughter had been previously born, and this was 1981 when I was taking this class. My son was born about a month before the class started, and he was actually 5.5 weeks premature when he was born. So that, of course, is a very stressful situation to begin with. But the other thing that I need to tell you is that at that time, we had done away with baptisms for babies, and we were having a bris ceremony for baby boys when they were born. Now, one can just imagine that any moil who's worth his salt would not do a bris for any of us. So what was one to do? Within the community, there was a young man who was studying at that time to become a physician's assistant. He knew the procedure for doing the physical circumcision. He would do the circumcision while 3 of the elders would come and recite the appropriate blessings. Only if you were somebody really, really special did Abba come to the bris. So of course the question was, we knew we were going to have a bris, but the question was, what do we do with a baby that's 5.5 weeks premature? That he was 5 pounds 11 ounces at birth, which was a decent size. They let me take him home at 3 days, but then he continued to lose weight. And by the time he was 8 days old, he was down to 4 pounds 8 ounces. And I basically was told that we should go ahead with the bris anyway on the 8th day. Now, again, most of us are aware that if a baby is not well, the bris is to be postponed until the baby is well enough. We were told to go ahead with it anyway, which we did. And when I look back on the 11 years that we were there, I say to myself, this is probably one of the most foolish things that I did that I could possibly have done. Fortunately, everything was fine, but it just goes to show you the amount of mind control that exists in a group like this. There were other things going on behind the scenes that we were not aware of, that were exposed at the end when we finally left. But let me go back to that Holocaust class for a second. My son attended class with me. Teacher said I should bring him to class with me, and this was not common in those days. This was 1981. Today, a lot of women bring their babies to class. It was not common in those days. I brought him to class with me, and when I needed to nurse him, I stepped outside and went to the ladies' room and in the lounge there and nursed him and changed his diaper and came back to class. But his being there had a profound effect on me. The first book that we read for class was Night by Elie Wiesel. And one night in the middle of the night, I was reading this while nursing this little itty bitty baby. And I was reading the story of how the Nazi soldiers would take the babies, rip them from the mother's arms, throw them in the air, shoot them, and then hand the dead body back to the mother's. And this is what I was reading with this little tiny baby in my arms. And it had a very, very profound effect on me. And I said to myself right then and there has to be a future, and we have to be a part of it. There has to be a future for the Jewish people, and we have to be a part of it. And I didn't know exactly what that meant. I just knew that there was something going to change in my life. And within a couple of weeks, there was a huge blow up where a number of people who had been very close to Abba decided they were leaving because they had exposed a number of things that about him that showed he was nothing but a fraud. And they decided before they left to share that information with us. So some of the things that were going on behind the scenes that most of us did not know about. There had been instances of people who had done things that were perceived as wrong and were subjected to some kind of physical punishment. Financial issues. While those of us who were not so wealthy were struggling to make our tithe, paying 10% of our salary, a huge amount of money was allotted to buy a 3.5-acre estate on the south shore of Long Island for Abba, complete with stables and everything. That was only for him to live in. We could not go there. Some of the young men in the group were being trained in the use of weapons with the belief that sometime in the future, there was going to be another Holocaust in the United States, and we were going to save the Jewish people. And worst of all was the sexual abuse that was taking place behind the scenes. And it was revealed that at some point, some young men in high school had been abused by Abba. One of them later became his right-hand man, and they had a relationship. But this young man also was the kindergarten teacher in the elementary school. And he would invite the boys from the kindergarten class to come home and spend Shabbos at Abba's house. And one can just only imagine what happened. And these young boys were all told, don't say a word because God will kill your parents, or and just terrible things were told to these 5- and 6-year-old boys. So when we heard all of this, we said, this is crazy. This is enough. We have to leave. And we did. And now the bottom had fallen out of our world. What do we do? Where do we go? We couldn't go back to the church. We were so far removed from Christianity, we couldn't go back there. We didn't want to go back there. And we knew we weren't Jewish. And yet the one thing that meant any sense to us at that point, the one thing we kept going back to, was observing the Jewish rituals we had started. We continued to observe Shabbat at home, but we would have Friday night dinner. We would make Havdalah at the end of Shabbos. We would stay home on Shabbat. We would study the Parsha of the week together. And after doing that for a while, I said to my husband one day, please let me call the rabbi. And he said, okay. And I knew enough from what I had learned in my college classes that conservative Judaism was the only way to go for me, because after 11 years of taking this and putting it on the shelf, I needed to reclaim my brain. I needed to be able to say, I don't understand that. Will you explain that to me if something bothered me? Or why is that so? Or why is that not so? Or why do we do this? Or why do we not do this? I needed to be able to do that. And I also needed to be in an environment where I could be a woman and be able to do those things. And so conservative Judaism was the only thing that made any sense. I approached, there was a conservative synagogue about 7.5 miles away from our house. I called up the rabbi. I said to him that I was interested in a formal conversion to Judaism for a family of 4. He was kind of floored at first, but said, okay, come on in, why don't we talk? And to make a long story short, he worked with us for several months. to try and get rid of some of the misconceptions that we had attained through being in this group and give us a proper Jewish education. By the way, along the way, when I was in college, I had actually I had taken 4 semesters of college Hebrew. I had no idea why I was doing that. I just knew I wanted to learn Hebrew. So that came in really handy. He worked with us, and on the day before Rosh Hashanah in September of 1982, the 4 of us went to the beach on the North Shore of Long Island in the early morning hours and used the waters of Long Island Sand as our mikveh to come to Judaism. And that night, my husband and I were remarried under the chuppah with our children in attendance. Our daughter was 4, our son was 13 months old. The next night was Rosh Hashanah. The synagogue was the North Shore Jewish Center in Port Jefferson Station, Long Island, which we are still members of today. We have changed rabbis several times since then, but we are still members there today. And a lot of my Jewish life was formed through my time there. I was encouraged right away to tell my story. We had an event called Torathon, and the rabbi who had done the conversion, his name was Moshe Edelman. Some of you may have heard of him. He asked me to tell my story at a Torathon, and we had standing room only because people wanted to hear our story. Not only were people interested in the story, from the very first time I told the story, people said to me, "You need to write a book." So that book is about halfway done. I hope to finish it soon. And the congregation reached out and accepted us with wide open arms. And of course, for me, one of the first groups to reach out to me was the Sisterhood. And I was invited to be not only a member of Sisterhood, I was invited to sit on the Sisterhood board. I also, I learned how to read Torah at the rabbi's encouragement, even though women were not allowed to read on Shabbat mornings at that point. I learned how to read Torah. Along the way, I also learned how to read Haftorah, to learn how to read the book of Esther and the book of Eryka. So that as the synagogue became egalitarian and those possibilities were opened up to women, I was able to become involved in those things. As I said, I always loved study, and I threw myself into study. I studied on my own. I bought books, and I would go attend classes wherever I could. I had my adult bat mitzvah at the synagogue in 1984. It was the first time I ever gave a Devar Torah. In 1988, May of 1988, I remember going to speak with Rabbi Edelman one day, and I said to him, "I've reached a decision." And he said to me, "Oh, you're going to rabbinical school." And I said, "What?" I said, No. I said, "I came to tell you that I've decided I'm going to start putting on tefillin," which in 1988 was unusual for a woman to do. But nevertheless, it made a lot of sense to me for a lot of various reasons. And I have been doing that ever since. 2 years later, in June of 1990, as Rabbi Edelman was preparing to leave us to go to another congregation, at a sisterhood meeting, he had something personal to say to every woman at the table. And when he got to me, he looked at me and he said to me, "Margie, if I had my druthers, you wouldn't be here." Dramatic pause, in which all the women at the table had the same reaction that probably many of you have at the same moment. They were like, "Oh, what a terrible thing to say." And then he went on and he said, "You wouldn't be here because you would be in the city at the Jewish Theological Seminary in the rabbinical school because that's where you belong." This was in 1990. The seminary had only been ordaining women for a few years at that point. And I said, "What?" I thought, me? You know, but the seed was planted. The seed was planted in my head. So during the time I was at North Shore, I was on the Board of Trustees for 19 years. I served as sisterhood president for 3 years. I served as president of the congregation for 3 years. I served as ritual chairman for 9 years, the first woman in the congregation ever to do that. And during that whole time, every once in a while, I came back to thinking about rabbinical school. But I wasn't in a position to really do anything about it. I first wrote to JTS in 1988, right around the time that I first started putting on tefillin. I just wrote to them and they sent me a brochure and I looked at it and I read through it and I said, no, not me. And I threw it in a drawer and forgot about it. And over the course of the next 20 years or so, I must have written another 4 times or so to JTS. Every couple of years I wrote again, I thought about it again, got the material, looked at it, said, no, it can't be, threw it in the desk drawer and forgot about it. And it was in 2010 when retirement was on the horizon, I could see it on the horizon, that I had my husband and I had a discussion about what was going to happen after retirement. And we made the decision then that I would continue working for 4 more years until I could retire, and that once I retired, I would apply to the seminary, which I did. In 2014, I retired from my teaching career in June. And in September, I started my studies at the seminary. Now, when I applied for rabbinical school that year, I was only accepted on a non-matriculated basis. What that meant was I was not formally in the rabbinical school program. I was allowed to take classes, not all classes, but I was allowed to take classes in the rabbinical school, but I was not formally enrolled. And they said to me, of course, that I could reapply the following year. But nonetheless, I took a full load of classes that first year. There were certain classes that I couldn't take because I was not fully matriculated, but I said to the dean of the rabbinical school, Danny Nevins at the time, I said, if I can't take those classes, then tell me what other classes I can take so that I can take a full load, because I didn't want to be going into the city for just 9 credits. That's a lot of traveling for just 9 credits. So I took a full class load that first year. A year later, I applied again, and this time I was accepted fully into the program. Now, my 5 years at JTS were an amazing, emotional, inspirational. I mean, there are so many adjectives that I could use to describe my 5 years at JTS. Invigorating. When I started my studies at JTS, that's September of 2014 when I started, I turned 60. My birthday is in September. And I was studying with students in their 20s and 30s, students much younger than I, many of whom had gone to day school and had a greater base of knowledge than I had. They were gracious to me. My Chevruta partner at one point was the youngest student in the rabbinical school. I was the oldest. There were 40 years between us, and it didn't matter. We studied Talmud together, and it was a wonderful experience. He is today a chaplain in the Air Force. I took as many classes as possible because I just loved the learning. I wanted to learn everything. I wanted to learn as much as I could. My major was in, we had to do a master's degree. My major was in Bible. It was an emotional 5 years. There were times when I said to myself, this is great, this is exciting, this is so wonderful. And there were other times where I said, what am I doing here? This is so hard. I can't keep up with this. I can't do this. And indeed, there was one time at the end of the first year where I accidentally left my backpack on the Long Island Railroad train as it pulled out of the station. It had everything in it, and I just cried and cried. And I said, that's it. I'm not going back. I can't do this. It's too much. And various family members talked me down off of that ledge, thank goodness. I would say that for 5 years, it was for a variety of reasons, my emotions were very raw for what I was experiencing, and for also the training that I was getting, training in how to be a rabbi and how to help people when they come to me to ask me for advice or to ask me for support. So in my last year at rabbinical school, I did serve part-time in the congregation in Newburgh, New York. I went there 2 Shabbases a month. And the weeks when I didn't go, I shared that pulpit with the same rabbi who had done my conversion so many years before, the same rabbi who had told me I belonged in rabbinical school, Moshe Edelman. I was there 2 weeks a month. He was there the other 2 weeks a month. We shared that pulpit. And what a serendipitous thing. It was just amazing. I was ordained on May 23rd, 2019. And I came to Women's League. I was not looking for a full-time pulpit at this point in my career. I wanted to work part-time. And in April of 2021, the perfect part-time position came calling when I received an email from Rabbi Ellen Mullins Fields saying, we should talk. And so many of you know me from Women's League. I was fortunate enough not to need any scholarship money when I was at JTS because I had a pension after a 30-year career. That was not the case and is not the case for my younger fellow students in both the cantorial and rabbinical schools. The benefit of your money from Torah Fund, which you've heard some about today, and you will hear more about today. I cannot emphasize to you enough how important it is to all of the students in the rabbinical school, at the Jewish Theological Seminary, as well as all of the other seminaries. The support that they receive from Women's League is so important. And so I strongly encourage you to continue making donations to Women's League, to Torah Fund. So Karen, let's just briefly bring up the pictures, and I'll tell you what we're looking at, and then I'll answer some questions. Okay. So this is from an article which was in the Long Island Newsday around the time that the group was exposed for what it was. So there is a drawing on the left of Abba. There is a picture on the right of him, and underneath are pictures of the 2 buildings. We actually took over 2 churches, one in Massapequa and one in East Meadow. We took and throughout the Christian community. It's really horrendous when I think about it. This is just an excerpt from the article, and what I have circled there, it says, at the North Shore Jewish Center in Port Jefferson, 8 Christians so affected by the Judaism they had learned despite their disenchantment with its leader are taking classes in preparation for formal conversion to Judaism. That's us. But we wanted to remain anonymous because we wanted to get on with our lives, and we did not want to have a lot of questions. This is the brochure from Stony Brook University. There's the outside of the brochure, spring of 1982, and you see a picture there. The photographer happened to wander into my class one night while I was sitting there with my son, and the photographer couldn't resist taking a picture, and it ended up in the bulletin. So there he is. He looks totally enthralled with what the teacher was talking about. But nevertheless, having an infant in a class on the Holocaust had a profound effect on everyone in the room. This is a picture from my adult bat mitzvah in 1984. It was the first time I gave a Dvar Torah. And that was done through our sisterhood. This is, you see the brochure there, 1988, 1989. This was the first time I wrote to the seminary. I actually kept all of these things in my desk drawer. And then the next picture shows a few more of them. You see several different dates there. I really did write every couple of years and threw them all in a drawer until I finally applied in 2014. This is an article from about the Agudas Israel, the congregation in Newburgh, where Rabbi Edelman and I shared the pulpit in my senior year. This is from the program from ordination. And there are two names there, Rabbi Edelman and Rabbi Aaron Benson is the current rabbi of the North Shore Jewish Center. He was my mentor for the internship program, which I was allowed to do at my home synagogue. So I had both of them as mentors. You notice I'm the only person that did that. I was always a troublemaker. But they both had a strong influence on my life. So, so each of them played a different role in the ordination, and we'll see the pictures coming up next, I think. Oh no, this is my graduating class. Some of you may recognize some of your rabbis and or cantors in that picture. Oh, this is my official graduation photo on the left and the cap and gown photo on the right. By the way, when I graduated, I was 65 years old at the time. Yes. This is Rabbi Aaron Benson, and he was the one who put the talit on me. And he, at that point, is giving me his blessing after putting on the talit. It was a very special moment. And then the next picture, this is the actual moment of ordination, and that is Rabbi Edelman. I invited him to be my sponsor. How could I not? He was the one who started me on this journey. That's the picture I use for publicity today. So there we have it. Thank you, Karen. And so now I don't know how much time you want to allot for questions and answers, but I am certainly willing to answer any questions. And Marjorie, I'll leave it up to you how long you want to do the Q&A for.
Well, we at this point only have 2 questions in the chat, both of which are really interesting ones.
Okay.
The first is, who did the teaching if a pastor was the leader?
He did the teaching. Because he was making himself out to be something other than a pastor. He told this fantastical story about how he had learned everything he knew from his grandfather, who learned it from his father, and so on and so on and so on. And he traced it all the way back to basically the time of Christ, that this tradition had been handed down from then. So yeah.
Okay, and the second question in our chat is, do you think that you would have converted if you hadn't come under the influence of Abba?
Okay, excellent question. I get that question a lot. The answer is, I can't tell you for sure, but I think so. I think so. I mean, we have it in Judaism, we have a tradition, we speak of something called the Pintele Yid, which means the spark of a Jewish soul. And it is believed that everyone who ultimately converts to Judaism, that when they're born, there's something there, a spark, which just needs the flame to light it, to bring them back to Judaism. And indeed, many Jews by choice can pinpoint things in their earlier life experience that don't make any sense. For example, in my case, why did I study Hebrew during my last 2 years of college? My father asked me that very question, and I said to him, Daddy, I don't know. All I know is I want to read the Bible in the language it was originally written. And a few other things, that make no sense in any other context. So I believe that, yes, if it wasn't this way, it would have been some other way. Was this a difficult way to come to it? Yeah, yeah. But nevertheless, here I am. So.
Okay. Well, unless someone wants to add a question right now, and of course, if you think of a question after Rabbi Cella is finished with her portion of this program, please put it in the chat and I'll make sure she gets it. And
Rita has her hand up.
Rita, okay, could you unmute, please? There you go.
Hi, I did type it, but it went to Cheryl instead of you, Marjorie.
Oh,
sorry.
Cheryl should have, okay, well, it doesn't matter.
So Rabbi Cella, I have heard you before, and I was the one recommended for you for the program today because I love your story and I love the way you tell it. But I have one question that just occurred to me. The man who referred to himself as Abba, when he started this group within the church or outside of the church, why did he revert back to the Jewish customs and to Judaism more than teaching evangelical Christianity? That makes me curious.
Okay. Well, first of all, a lot of people ask, why did he even do what he did? And a lot of these cult leaders, they are narcissistic. They do it for the attention. Nobody knows exactly why, but by trying to mix Judaism and Christianity, you have to realize he put us in a place where there was no place to go. Because sometimes we would ask ourselves, where would you go if you left? When people had doubts, which you weren't supposed to have, but where would you go if you left? Well, we couldn't go back to the church because we didn't believe in standard Christian belief anymore. We didn't believe in Jesus the way that the church did.
Right.
On the other hand, we couldn't go to the synagogue either because we weren't really Jews. And the synagogues were looking askance at us. They were very suspicious of us, rightfully so. So there was no place else that we could go with this belief. So he kind of had us right in the palm of his hand. And then he handed us this whole fantastical story about how we had a special mission in the world. And that mission was going to be to save Jews when there was another Holocaust.
Right, you had said that.
Yeah. So that I think that's why. I mean, because he had us like right there. There was no place we could go with this kind of belief.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Anyone else have a question for Rabbi Margie Cella? I don't see any more in the chat. I don't see any raised hands. Rabbi, thank you so much for sharing your journey. I
My
have
pleasure.
also heard it before, but each time I hear it, I am just enthralled. Up, we've got a raised hand. Cheryl.
I have a question. Did you have to, I'm in awe of anyone who is going to the seminary and learning to be a rabbi and studying Torah. Did you have to know Hebrew? Was that a prerequisite? I'm sure
Yes.
it's very important, but.
Yes, we all had to take 2 semesters of Hebrew. I ended up being required to take 4 semesters of Hebrew because of the non-matric status the first year, and then so I ended up having to take 4 semesters of Hebrew. And actually, I will tell you that, in my opinion, the Hebrew teachers were, I felt, particularly hard on me. I came into JTS with 4 semesters of undergraduate Hebrew under my belt, but I think they were really hard on me. But it is a definite requirement. When I first was looking into it, and I spoke with Rabbi Nevins at that point, and I said, "What should I do to prepare myself over the next 4 years?" And his answer was, Hebrew, and more Hebrew. So yes, it is a definite requirement. Yeah. Okay.
Again, thank you for sharing your journey with us. I don't see any hands. I don't see anything more in the chat. So again, if anyone thinks of anything, please put it in the chat and I will make sure that Rabbi Cella gets it. But
Or
again,
you can send me an email. It's very easy to remember, rabbicella@gmail.com.
and I am putting that in the chat.
Okay.
Well, I think that if everyone's feeling like I did not know your story. I am speechless. It will take me time to absorb the uniqueness, your perseverance, your almost destiny. It's amazing. Thank you. And everyone else, if you were inspired by Rabbi Cella's journey as I was, you know how important your donations to Torah Fund are to bring us Jewish educators and clergy of this caliber. This year is special as the 80th anniversary of Torah Fund. There is an 80+ campaign to extend what you ordinarily would donate by $80 or more. Those in the 80+ category will be acknowledged by name at the Women's League for Conservative Judaism's convention in July, the convention that Marjorie spoke of. Now we have a deeper understanding of the value of the education our clergy and educators get from the seminaries, with scholarship supported by Torah Fund. I call on Marcia Toppel to give us a few words about legacy before our musical part of the program begins. Marcia?
Thank you, Cheryl. I'd like to share a few words from Kathy Swerdlow and myself, the Torah Fund Legacy Society co-chairs. What is the difference between sight and vision? Seeing is a vital sense and critical to the understanding the world around us. Someone who sees is focused on what is happening now. Vision, on the other hand, implies a different focus. Rather than looking at the present, a visionary is focused on the future. As in a game of chess, a new player concentrates on the hand in front of her, while the seasoned player is playing several moves ahead. The ability to be a visionary is seen in Torah Fund. As contributors to the annual Torah Fund campaigns and special projects, our donors are focused on the present. They see the challenges facing our students and are moved to make a difference through their donations. This is necessary, valued, and greatly appreciated. The seminary has been receiving estate donations for many years, but in June of 2019, Visionaries in Women's League created an opportunity for a more organized campaign to encourage these types of donations. The Torah Fund Legacy Society was established. Members would receive a charm which says Atid, meaning future, to attach to their current year's pin and demonstrate their long-term commitment to Torah Fund. Legacy giving is not just for the wealthy or for seniors. There is no minimum gift required and no expectation of payment while you are living. Any amount is appreciated. This process allows you to make a donation larger than you might otherwise be able to do at the present time, and funds go to support all 5 seminaries. As with any legacy designation, the control of the funds remains with the donor during her lifetime. Excuse me, my video is giving me grief. Sorry about that. There are several mechanisms for making a legacy donation, and each member is free to choose her own in consultation with her financial advisor, the one that works best for her and her personal situation. While we do not give financial advice, some of the suggested methods are making a donation through your will or trust, designate Torah fund as a beneficiary of a portion of a retirement fund or a life insurance policy, go to a bank or other financial institution, purchase a certificate of deposit, and make Torah fund the beneficiary. Our legacy societies are visionaries. They see the current need, but also focus on what the future holds. By making a legacy donation, these members have joined the ranks of those who created the vision that led to funding of Torah Fund in 1942. Just this morning, I received another bequest confirmation, and I am so pleased to announce that since June of 2019, 69 members have joined our Legacy Society. And I would like to recognize the 12 members from Seaboard who are members of the Legacy Society. We have one donor who has chosen to remain anonymous, and the following other names I've been authorized to read: Ellen Kaner-Bresnik, Barbara Ezring, Marjorie Furman, Mark Furman, Toby Holtzman, Kathy Latofsky, Audrey Maidens of blessed memory, Lori Sunshine, myself, Cheryl Wasserman, and Rita Wertlieb. Toda Rabbah to each of you who have made this important legacy donation. As we celebrate Torah Fund's 80th year, wouldn't it be great to have 80 or more members of the Legacy Society? And for more information, you can contact me or the Torah Fund office. My email Karen has shared that slide. That's my email contact. And if anyone has any questions, please let me know. Either put them in the chat now if I can answer them quickly, or contact me personally, and I'll be happy to get in touch with you privately, and we can discuss what's involved for you to become a legacy donor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marsha Topple. After hearing her and knowing that for an unstated sum, I could pass on what was important to me in my will and not just assets and money, I like that, so I joined. Our Jewish practice is about more than words. Music takes us to the very soul, and our practice is steeped in music. So how fitting to now turn to two cantors who got their training through Torah Fund scholarships. It's my pleasure to introduce our two cantors who not only harmonize musically, but are also bonded in marriage. Cantor Eryka Velazquez, originally from Southern California, swapped coasts to pursue her dream of becoming a cantor. Music and singing have always played a major role in her life, and she utilizes the power of prayer and song to connect present-day Jews with ancient Jewish traditions. Also having a deep love for teaching, Cantor Velazquez recently graduated from the William Davidson School of Jewish Education. During her time at JTS, she has taught music, liturgy, B'nai Mitzvah, and Judaica at Camp Ramah, Wisconsin, Park Avenue Synagogue, South Huntington Jewish Center, and Women's League of Conservative Judaism. I am sorry for my stumble. My husband's making noise in the kitchen. She feels blessed to call Central Synagogue Beth Emeth home as their cantor. And then we have her spouse and son, a biological son of Barbara Ezring, Cantor Gil Ezring, the son of Rabbi Murray and Women's League's own Barbara Ezring. He has three older siblings, Aviva, Tammy, and Ron. He grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, and began his musical and Judaic studies there. He graduated from Appalachian State University with a bachelor's degree in music education. About a year later, he would begin his studies at JTS, where he was ordained as a Chazan in 2018. Cantor Ezring writes music with his sister Aviva as the Jewish music duo Ages, Agez. He is serving as Chazan at Bet Torah Synagogue in Mount Kisco, New York. Once you hear them, you're going to want to continue to hear them, not just in a replay of this event, but we can discuss how we can continue to hear them and whether they are producing a CD after their performance. So it is my pleasure to turn to you. And I have tears in my eyes from Rabbi Cella, and those would be followed by your performance. Again, thank you.
Shalom, dai, dai.
So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. We're so excited to be here and to see and to meet all of you. Actually, why don't you introduce the first song that we just did?
So that song was Shalom Aleichem, and it was one of the two last pieces of music that I wrote while studying at JTS. And I actually wrote it literally just like directly one floor under Eryka in the Brush dormitory. And I mean, it is a song about, welcoming in Shabbat, and what better way to start a program than a song of welcome?
The next couple of songs that you're going to hear, actually the set, but I'm going to be focusing on the next two songs. Were a lot of these were either that we learned through our studies at JTS, or they were written at JTS, as you just heard. So it was really a space that provided a lot of inspiration. And so the next song that you're going to hear is a piece of text that I really love that comes from the Amidah, Yiyu Leratzon. And this is written by Lori Akers, and she is this amazing songwriter, and she really writes beautiful melodies for female voices, and I just feel so empowered every time I sing one of her songs, and this one is actually one that I did at my senior recital. And then the following one, we were thinking about songs, to how do we express gratitude through song for the way that Torah Fund has influenced and supported the students. And so we brought a Lador Vador, because what better way to say, thank you for supporting that generation and continuing in past generations. So we use our tefillah for that. So first Yiyu Leratzon, and then Lador Vador, and then my husband will explain the rest of the set. May the words of my mouth be acceptable to you. May the path I create and the actions I take be in line with your divine glory. May the love that I feel be acceptable to you. May the times that I cry, I resist to say goodbye, being in line with your divine glory. Yiyu Leratzon, Imrei fi, ve'yon libi lefanecha. Adonai tzuri ve'goali, my rock and my redeemer. May the life that I lead be acceptable to you. May the times that I rise share my voice deep inside, be in line with your divine glory. Yiyu Leratzon, may it be your will. Yiyu Leratzon, may it be your will. Yiyu Leratzon, may it be your will.
vador, nagid God lecha. Ledor vador, we protect this chain. From generation to generation, Ledor vador, these lips will praise your name. Looking back on the journey that we carry in our heart, from the shadow of the mountain to the waters that would part. We are blessed and we are holy. We are children of your way, and the words that bring us meaning, we will have the strength to say. Ledor vador, nagid God lecha. Ledor vador, we protect this chain. From generation to generation, Ledor vador, these lips will praise your name. So as I said, the Shalom Aleichem is one of the last two pieces of music that I wrote while studying at JTS. This next song is actually the last song I wrote at JTS. At that time, a melody for a text called Shabbat HaMalkah or Hachama was becoming popular, written by Rabbi Josh Warshawski. And I decided, you know what, I want to also come up with a melody for this text. So this is a text about the sun going down and beginning Shabbat. Hachama merosh ha'ilanot נסתלקה, בואו ונצא לקראת שבת המלכה. הנה היא יורדת הקדושה ברוחה, ועימה מלאכים צבא שלום ומנוחה. מראש האילנות נסתלקה, בואו ונצא לקראת שבת המלכה. קדושה ברוכה, ועם המלאכים ציווה שלום ומנוחה. בואי המלכה, המלכה, בואי, בואי, הכלה, הכלה. שלום עליכם, מלאכי השלום, שלום עליכם, מלאכי השלום. We do have one more song for you this evening.
Can I interrupt for a minute?
Yes.
Is your one more song the happy birthday song?
No, we have one
Okay,
more.
because I'd like you to hold off on that one
Yes.
to the very end. I'll give you a signal. Thank you.
Okay. So, in honor of Torah Fund's 80th anniversary, we have chosen our last song. This is a song I originally wrote for the retirement of my father from Temple Israel in Charlotte, North Carolina. I wrote it with my sister Aviva. In Jewish tradition, we have a blessing anytime we get to a moment that we want to remember, a moment to mark in time. And that blessing is the Shehacheanu. And so we wrote this song about a time of transition, and a milestone anniversary is definitely one of those moments of transition that we want to mark in time. And so here is Shehacheanu.
Looking back on the lessons learned, finding new places and faces all along the way, helping to steer down this road as it twists and it turns. Shehecheyanu, V'kiyemanu, V'higianu, Lazman hazeh. Shehecheyanu, V'kiyemanu, V'higianu, Lazman hazeh. Ya-na-na-na, ya-na-na-na, ya-na-na-na-na-na-na. Everyone, ya-na. Ya-na-na-na, ya-na-na-na, ya-na-na-na-na-na. Nice. Ya-na-na-na, ya-na-na-na, ya-na-na-na-na-na-na. Ya-na-na-na, ya-na-na-na, ya-na-na-na-na-na.
One more time.
Ya-na-na-na, ya-na-na-na, ya-na-na-na-na-na-na. Ya-na-na-na, ya-na-na-na, ya-na-na-na-na-na. Ya-na-na-na-na.
Did I remember correctly that you wrote this also for this occasion? Or this is the inaugural presentation of your song?
Actually, this was originally performed at my father's retirement celebration, but we did choose it for this event, to use it in this program specifically for the 80th anniversary.
Thank you. Thank you. We're coming back to you, but Marjorie tells me that there are some late breaking questions in the chat for Rabbi Cella. And since we had a little more time in the program, we're going to go back to Rabbi Cella to see if she can answer those questions and then come back to our closing. Thank you, Marjorie.
Okay. Thank you for coming back, Rabbi Cella, to answer some more questions.
My pleasure. And can I just take a moment to say what a pleasure it is to share the bill today with these two wonderful cantors. We all were in school together at the same time. I know Eryka and Gil, and what a pleasure it is to listen to them.
It's always a pleasure to listen to them. I've heard them a number of times. The two questions that came up in the chat are related. The first one is, what were your parents' reaction when you decided to convert to Judaism?
Again, that's a frequent question that I receive. Initially, not happy. As I said, my parents were very religious Christians. So, and I could understand why they would not be happy. I mean, from their point of view, it didn't make any sense for somebody who once believed in Jesus to not believe in Jesus anymore. It was very, very difficult for them. On the other hand, they had been telling us we were involved in a cult for so long, and they were just happy that we were out of there, and happy that we were finding some path. So it was a difficult transition for a number of years. We had to make a lot of compromises. And but ultimately, I have to say, I have 4 siblings. My mother and my siblings all came to accept. My father, unfortunately, passed away 6 months after the conversion, very suddenly and very unexpectedly. But my mother and my siblings all came to accept, not only accept, they attended my daughter's bat mitzvah, my son's bar mitzvah. And in 2019, when I was ordained, 3 of my 4 siblings were in the audience at JTS when I was ordained. So today they accept it and are very proud of me.
Okay, you kind of already answered the second, I think, but when you made your decision to be a rabbi, what were your parents' reactions to taking that additional step in Judaism?
Yeah, well, by the time I actually applied and made this, I mean, I had been thinking about it. I don't think I ever mentioned that I was thinking about it to my mother. And my mother passed in 2011. So she passed before I actually applied to rabbinical school. I know I had often wondered, how I would explain that to her. But that eventually eventuality never came about. I have a feeling she would have been supportive of me. For her entire life, she was devoted to her church. Her life was the church. And I said to my siblings not too long ago, I said, don't you think Mom would have made a good minister? She probably would have, because she was as devoted to her faith as I am to mine. And I'd like to think that she would have been proud of me. And I think my father would have been as well.
Okay, those were the two additional questions that were in the chat. So
Okay.
Thank you again, Rabbi Cella,
Again, my
for your
pleasure.
presentation and for answering all of the questions that were in the chat. Again, if
Okay.
anyone has any more, Rabbi Cella's email is in the chat, or you can just put your question in the chat and I will forward it on. She will answer you directly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. It's all yours again.
Thank you for attending our celebration. Recordings will be available shortly. As soon as it is released, I will let you know via email to all of you, as well as all the Sisterhood Torah Fund chairs in our region. In addition, there will be an announcement in a newsletter for those who are interested to contact me for the link. I want to remind everyone before we close about tomorrow night's Torah Fund Stands with Israel program. Did you want to say did Barbara want to say any more about that, or? Okay. Yes.
Yeah, just go ahead and register if you haven't so far. The speaker will be the ambassador to Panama and the Caribbean area from Israel. And please join us tomorrow night. Just need to register.
Okay. So with that, we go back to our glorious Cantors. And isn't it wonderful and amazing that they were at JTS at the same time as Rabbi Cella, which shows you again the breadth of Jewish education that's offered there. All right, with that, we will close with everybody participating, hopefully, with our Cantor, Eryka and Gil, if you don't mind my using your first names. But lead us, please, in for this 80th anniversary.
You got it. You ready?
Happy anniversary to you. Happy anniversary to you. 80th anniversary, dear Torah Fund. Happy anniversary to you.
And Karen, thank you again. It was flawless. You were amazing. Karen Balina.